Good evening. I'd like to call the June 3rd, 2019 Davie County Commissioners meeting to order. At this time, I will ask Commissioner Jones to lead us in the invocation.
Let us pray. Father, we come here tonight, blessed people. We come here with thanks in our heart, thanking you for placing us in this freest of all lands. Thanking you for the mercy and grace that you bestowed upon each of us. Father, we thank you that men and women have felt the call to fight on battlefields in wars, that we might be free tonight. We thank you for men and women in our EMS and our fire departments and our law enforcement, Father, that are called to keep our homes and our streets safe in this great county. We thank you for teachers. We thank you for a community that stands by each other, and Father, stands on the rock, Father Jesus Christ, that you've placed us on. So, Lord, tonight we come here to do your business. We come here to thank you. We come here to seek your wisdom, your discernment, to do the right thing in your eyes. For the men and women, boys and girls of this great county you've placed us in. We pray this prayer in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. You will stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks for everyone coming out tonight. Welcome. We will move along. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. That is approved. Thank you. All right, next we go to public comment.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, no one has signed up tonight for public comments, so you can move on.
Okay. All right. This time we have presentation on the Public Utilities Capital Improvement Plan. I'll call on Mr. Black.
Commissioners, good evening. Pleasure to be up here tonight presenting on the capital improvement plan for public utilities. I'll take a little bit of your time tonight to give you an outlook of the next 5 years. We do this annually. I have Mike Weir with me here tonight. If you have any technical questions, anything in the projects, I will refer to Mike for those. As you can see, we've got 8 projects listed through the 5-year horizon here. Most of these are same projects you've seen last year. We have added a few additional projects in the horizon, which are number 5, 6, and 7, which refer to the SCADA upgrades, carbon system at Sparks Road, and the new water main extensions. You can look out across the years of how the projected monies. Last year I went back and reviewed. I think we had a $35 million budget for these projects. That's an additional $3 million this year. Now, some of the details. First project was to remove Jeffco lift station. That project is currently in the works. We have a few easements left to obtain before we begin the project. Eastern Davie Sewer is currently underway. Most of you know, we're starting at Forsyth County side, the pump station, working our way back. That project seems to be on schedule. So we should be, I think we have a bore scheduled for June to cross the river. three new projects I'll jump to is 5, 6, and 7. The upgrade of the SCADA. That is a communications software that talks with all utilities assets throughout the county. It was installed in the early 2000s. That system is becoming out of date, and this is an upgrade system to get it on its own server, so we have less interference through talking through the networks. Number 6 is the construction of the carbon feed system. This would be utilized at Sparks Road. I know Mr. Elliott took some time this year visiting different departments, and one of those was going out to the water plant at Sparks Road and reviewing the system that's in place now. There's a few hazard and safety concerns there, plus the additional time for contact time for the carbon to be interacting with water is what we're looking for. Next would be our 7th project, design and construct the new water mains and extend service throughout the county. Once we have our water and sewer plan in place, those plans will drive those water extensions where they need to be in the county. And 8 is a current study taking place with Hayes and Sawyer. This is the plan that Moxville is covering 1/3 of the cost, and we look to have that presentation probably end of summer, and you'll hear that from Johnny. The last 2 slides are a precursor to what you'll see in July from the Public Utilities Director, Johnny Lambert. These are just to briefly go over the water and sewer rates. The board approved prudent fiscal policies to help guide the future in water sewer enterprise fund. As determined by the financial forecast or TELUS, the county will implement an annual rate increase as necessary with the goal of limiting that increase to a maximum of 3% annually. This is the proposed water and sewer budget. This budget includes the fee recommended by our consultant to the board last year, as noted on the approved fee schedule of a 2.25% increase. And again, these last 2 slides are a precursor to what you'll see in July from Johnny Lambert on his presentation. Any questions with the projects? Go back and hit them.
What do you think the time duration on the bore at the river is?
Mike, do you have what? I'm trying to think how many days they had in there. And off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. I have to go back and look at the plans. I know they are projected to start 1st of June, so here in the next week or 2.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, this comes back before you. I know last year when you saw this, you were able to make some adjustments as needed. This is the enterprise fund, obviously, so we reinvest in the program to make it what it needs to be. So there were a couple modifications from last time. You know, as far as the SCADA upgrade, you know, that's a pretty important thing. As every time the state comes in, they're looking at us to make sure our electronics and our software is what it needs to be. So this definitely addresses that issue. Also, I want to thank Mr. Weir and Mr. Lambert and all their staff. I know when I did Shadow, I learned a whole lot. One thing in particular is the carbon system and really the process that our staff go through to do that treatment. And you know, that isn't the safest process. So I learned that front and center and heard them. This was one thing that came strongly from staff as a recommendation. So I'm proud and happy to see that up here. So I think the changes that we made and modified since you saw this last are really what we'll call requirements. We have to have that SCADA system in place to run the plants. We also have to have safety intact for our staff. So I feel good about these recommendations, and Mr. Lambert will be coming back, as Mr. Blackwater said, in July to give you a full update on utilities. So Commissioner Blakely, he can give you all those timelines at that time. We wanted to wait till July to do that because we'll know more then. A lot of these dates are fluid at this point, but we think by your July meeting when Mr. Lambert is in front of you, he'll be able to address all those pieces and kind of give you a global overview of where utilities is going. Because there's a lot happening right now in this world, and I think He and all of our utility staff do a fabulous job, and want to say thanks to Mr. Blackwiller for working with them on this capital improvement plan. So we wanted you to see the modifications from last year before we started talking about budget here shortly. So, you know, Mike's smarter than both Brad and I combined, and then some when it comes to all things utilities. And Mr. Lambert's on vacation this week, or he'd be here himself. But you'll see him in July. But if you have any questions, we'll absolutely try to help you tonight with these modifications that you see before you.
Any further questions for Mr. Blackwelder? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so the next item on the agenda, tonight, this board will be wearing a couple different hats, obviously with the Board of Commissioners, but we're also the, what are we? We're the Advanced Fire Protection Tax District Commission, so I'm gonna let Mr. Eller talk about that for a moment.
Mr. Chairman, before we start talking about that, if it'll be okay, could the board approve that capital improvement plan that we just saw, so we take note of the modification on record, please?
I make a motion that we approve it.
Second.
Motion and a second. We have any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. That is approved.
Thank you,
And
sir.
since you're going from the Board of County Commissioners to now the Davie County Fire Tax District Commission, you may want to consider a motion to go out of session as a Board of Commissioners and go into session as the Board of the Davie Advanced Fire Tax District Commission. That'll be a public hearing also, public meeting also.
Okay. We can take that as one motion.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman, to go out of session.
Okay, motion, Mr. Poindexter seconds that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, we are the Advanced Fire Protection Tax District Commission at the moment. Mr. Eller.
All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I want to go through a couple of dates, and I'm going to ask Ms. West then to come up and speak to a spreadsheet we have in front of you, and then Mr. Vogler will walk us through the steps required for this session tonight. On May 14, 2019, Chief Miller sent us the Advanced Fire Department's fiscal year 1920 budget spreadsheet breakout for both the Advanced Rural Fire Protection District and the non-rural municipal district as well. These amounts were $416,600 for the rural and $26,764 for the non-rural. On May 16, 2019, Chief Miller sent us the proposed rate of .02438 to meet their budget request for fiscal year 1920. This amount will be in addition to the 4-cent countywide rate that would also apply, making the total of 6.438 cents per $100 property value in the Advanced Rural Fire Protection District. In front of you is a spreadsheet that Ms. West had prepared as far as a breakout for the funds, and there's a small delta of about $200 that you will need to make a decision about tonight as far as setting the rate. But the proposed rate that we've received is .02438. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. West, and then we'll defer to Mr. Vogler.
Good evening. Before you tonight, hopefully you can find the one-page Advanced Fire Department document. On the left side and in the top is the calculation. This spreadsheet was prepared to determine the number of cents that it would take to fund them at their requested amount of $416,600 for the rural portion of Advanced Fire. So we calculate the number of cents to be a total, including the 4-cent countywide tax, to be 6.4205 cents. The request from Chief Miller is on the right-hand side, and that request was actually for 6.4238 cents, including the 4-cent countywide tax. That would give them $416,813 for the rural portion of Advanced Fire Department tax. At the bottom of the spreadsheet is just some information I think that would be helpful that breaks out their real and personal taxable value, the motor vehicle that would apply to the rural portion only, and the total, and further calculates their allocation and compares it to the current fiscal year's allocation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about this.
Mr. Chairman, we did put in the packet tonight for you the full budget that and supplemental documents that Advance Fire Department has submitted to the county, as well as the email from Chief Miller requesting their recommended rate, as well as their budget request for fiscal year 1920. So all that information is in your packet for you to review before deciding what action to take. So we need to decide on the rate for you as the Advance Rural Fire Protection District Commission, and Mr. Vogler can talk you through those next steps.
Yes. And what you'll be doing, you'll be sitting as the commission at this point in time, making a recommendation back to the County Board of County Commissioners as to a rate. And you will note in Robin's figure, she's got the 6 point.
I have the 6.4238 amount that was requested by the Advance Fire Department.
Yes, plus
The
she's got
ordinance.
the 6.4205 cents calculated on the left-hand side. And in the budget ordinance that you'll be presented with later, it has it's actually 2.4238 for the fire tax district. Remember that the 4 cents is already countywide anyway, so you'll need to back that out of the 6.4238 cents as far as what you as a fire tax district commission recommends to the Board of County Commissioners. But what you'll need to do at this point in time would be to make a determination after your discussions and have a motion and any further discussions, and then a vote on what you're going to recommend to the Board of County Commissioners later.
So that'd be a 2.42 and some change tax increase to the folks in that district.
In that fire tax district, yes.
Rural,
Rule only, correct.
okay.
As Mr. Vogler said, whatever rate you set, the budget ordinance would be reflective of that rate when we get to the budget presentation.
Okay. So at this time, open the floor up for comments, questions about the approval of the request from the Advance Fire Department, with us discharging our responsibility as the Advance Fire Protection Tax District Commission.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to recommend the Board of the County Commissioners that the Advanced Fire Protection Tax District rate be set at .02438 per 100 valuation within the fire tax district.
Okay. Second. A motion and a second. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of recommending the 2.438 per 100 valuation for the Advanced Fire Tax District back to the County Commissioners, please raise your hand. 3, 4, all opposed? 2. Okay, that passes 3-2. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the next thing you need to do then is have a motion by your board to go back into session to proceed with the agenda, which is next item's public hearings.
Make that motion.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of going back to being the county commissioners, raise your hand. All right, so we're back, county commissioners, and next we have 2 public hearings. The first is a zoning amendment, and call on Mr. Meadwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Board. Before you tonight, you have zoning map amendment 07-19. This is a request to rezone 0.84 acres of land from R20 to highway business. The subject piece of property is located at 2581 U.S. Highway 158. The property is further described as Davie County Tax Parcel G5 5401. Included in your package, you should have a zoning map showing the zoning in the area. The subject piece of property abuts a currently zoned existing highway business piece of zoning, as well as additional highway business zone property, which is to the north. However, all the other surrounding property is zoned R20. Also in your package, you'll see an aerial photograph. You can see that the site is comprised of a single-family dwelling, as well as an accessory structure, as well as the current business that the owners are wanting to rezone to. The Davie County land use plan designates this area as commercial. Our land use or growth enhancement strategy area classifies this as a primary growth area. The property was originally zoned to R20 in 1973, and the proposed zoning classification is for the Highway Business District was to establish principally for retail operations that are located along the roadways throughout the county. Public water is available, public sewer is not. The issues to consider, this comes to the board as a general use rezoning. So the board cannot consider just one specific use, but all those uses that would be allowed within that highway business zoning district. Other issues to consider, the property's potential as a commercial use, its potential as a residential use, its location along a major arterial, as well as its proximity to Interstate 40. Whether or not the proposed reclassification is consistent with the purposes, goals, objectives, and policies of adopted plans for the area, and if it's consistent with the overall character of existing development in the area. As with any of these type projects, if approved, the project would still need to come back through our development department to ensure compliance with all of our local ordinances and zoning regulations and things of that nature. So the planning board did hear this at its April 23rd meeting and did vote unanimously to approve. Action that the board should consider tonight: the board should either one, move to make a statement to be adopted in support of a motion to approve, or two, move that a statement be adopted in support to deny, or three, defer the item for additional consideration. So I'll be more than glad to answer any question that the board may have concerning this matter.
Need to have any comments from the neighbors?
No.
Anybody have any questions for any further questions for Mr. Meadwell? Okay, thank you. All right, this is a public hearing, so I will ask Mr. Vogler to help us out.
The chair has announced this is the date and hour of the public hearing on proposed zoning text amendment to Chapter 155.151 Davie County Code and Ordinance regarding the rezoning of Davie County Tax Map G5 54.01, a .84 acre tract from residential 20 to highway business, seen in the application by Vernon Berghorn. There's been due public notice given pursuant to Article 20B of the Chapter 153A of the North Carolina General Statutes and pursuant to Section 153.251 of the Davie County Code and Ordinance. It has been published in a newspaper with general circulation in Davie County twice as required, and the clerk of the board has attached the affidavit showing the publication in said paper at least 10 days prior to today's date. I would ask all who wish to comment to come forward, state your full name to the board, come forward to the podium, state your full name to the board, and then comment.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Hank Van Hoy. I represent Mr. Berghorn in this matter. As Henry VIII said to his third wife, I won't be with you long, because this is rather a straightforward procedure. This property was zoned R20 in 1974. For the past 24 years, it's been used as a business. It is consistent with the highway business use. It is in accordance with your zoning plan to be commercial and with your land use map to be commercial. The only thing that remains is to make the official zoning to comply with what you have already determined the proper use should be under your land use plan. The land use plan, particularly for those of you who are new on the board, is not a blueprint, but it is a guide that tells any developer, any owner, any neighbor what it is that you all have already determined by your land use plan is the proper use for a piece of property. In this case, this land meets all of your requirements for highway business. It's beside highway business. It is near a major intersection. It is in an area that is to be determined commercial. There is no practical use for this property as a residential use. I think your land use plan, when your prior board made that determination, recognized that fact. For those of you who don't know precisely where it is, though I suspect that you all do, it's beside Cassidy's store. Harold is here. Harold's store is renowned for milkshakes. I wish it was still there. I would visit it frequently as I used to. So there are just three simple, compelling reasons to rezone this. One is your planning board carefully considered it and recommended that it be rezoned unanimously. The other is that it's consistent with the determination that your board previously made when it adopted the land use plan and said that this property should be commercial, and your map reflects it accordingly. I am happy to answer any questions. Mr. Berghorn is here. He's happy to answer questions. Though this is a general use rezoning, for your information, what Mr. Berghorn does there and would continue to do there, essentially with he and his staff, is schedule the operation of their enterprise, which sells these clean furnaces that burn used oil. And that's really all that happens on this lot. Everything else happens at the sites where the businesses are and, or rather where the customers are. Essentially, it's a call center is what's there. I have a brochure I'm going to give you, which is interesting if you're not familiar with the product that his company sells, if I may approach. It is environmentally responsible business, allowing these companies to buy these furnaces that burn used oil and keep it from polluting. So, do you have any questions of me or of Mr. Berghorn?
Does he also live there as well in the residence?
He does presently, but he won't be able to live there after the rezoning occurs, which he knows.
Okay, any further questions for Mr. Benoit?
I would just say one final thing in general, not about the rezoning. It's, I haven't been to a rezoning hearing in a while, though I'll be before you again in the near future. It is always a joy to come before a local government board. I wish all the citizens had a chance to see how we self-govern ourselves. It's, for me tonight, I know practically everybody here, and it's like a covered dish dinner at church. All we need is the apple pie and Bonita for you to sing for.
I was going to say for you to sing, sir.
I got to do that Sunday so everybody at church. The Presbyterian pickers are performing. In fact, I've got to go practice after this is over. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, seeing no one else come before the board for this public hearing to the podium, I would, at this point in time, turn the meeting back over to you as chairman of the Board of County Commissioners to discuss this matter and make whatever motions are appropriate.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, we'll declare the public hearing closed.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve this rezoning.
I second.
Okay, motion and a second. All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the rezoning, raise your hand. That is approved, 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will leave you with that.
Okay. All right. Next, have a second public hearing on another rezoning matter, and Mr. Meadwell.
Mr. Chairman, before you tonight, you have zoning map amendment 06-19. This is a request by Rising Concepts, Inc. to rezone 1.4 acres of property from residential 20 to highway business special conditions. The subject piece of property is located at 2046 Highway 801 South, approximately 250 feet south of Feed Mill Road and Peoples Creek Road intersections, and further being described as Davie County Tax Parcel G8120A5. Again, in your packages, you see the zoning map of the area, which outlines the area that shows the area that's currently zoned R20. If you look across the street from the subject piece of property, there's a piece that is zoned community shopping center. There's a real estate office that's located right there. I think that used to be the TV repair shop. But further north at the intersection of Feed Mill and Peoples Creek and on up to closer to Cornets Road, you see larger pockets of area of commercial property. The aerial imagery that's shown in your package as well shows that there are two structures on the property, a single-family dwelling as well as an older kind of accessory block kind of building. The Davie County Land Use Plan identifies this area as to be commercial. And the growth enhancement strategy considers this area to be in a secondary growth area. The applicant has chosen to go the special conditions route in this zoning matter. In this, the applicant has to determine to the board what the use of the property is. And in turn, the board, in its review of this, is allowed to place conditions on the use. Those conditions have to be those that help make the site conform to the area and or conform to the requirements of the land use plan and or the zoning ordinance. So the type of business that Mr. Belk operates is would be considered a general contractor's office. So that is the only use that would be allowed to operate on that piece of property. So if for whatever reason, if he decides to sell the property in a year, a retail establishment could not go back there without first coming back to this board to amend that. So, with this special condition zoning, this is a two-step approval process. One, the board would have to approve the rezoning first, and then the conditions that have been provided to you, and these have been mutually agreed upon by staff, planning board, and the applicant, and we can go over those when we get to that point. The issues to consider, as I mentioned, this is a special use, special conditions zoning, but the board should also consider the site's potential as a commercial use, as a residential use. Same thing, that the project will go through our technical review committee just to ensure that there's compliance with whatever conditions that the board places, as well as any of the technical requirements that are outlined in the zoning ordinance. We can go over, if the board chooses, we can go over and talk about the conditions that we are proposing. One, that all representations made by the petitioners as part of the rezoning process be incorporated in the special conditions zoning permit issued by the Board of Commissioners as set forth. The use of the property shall be limited to the following: a general building contractor's office. All existing trees within 20 feet along the western and southern property lines shall be maintained. These trees shall not count toward any necessary required landscaping. There are no outdoor security lighting shall be installed other than normal residential dusted-on lighting, and no lighting shall be directed onto those adjoining properties. Commercial trash receptacles, they shall be enclosed with the 6-foot fence. Any signage has to be a monument-type sign, and it's limited to 32 square feet. No activity on the property should produce any kind of noise, in my opinion, that would create a nuisance situation, and should not create any kind of dust, fumes, or odors. And this is a condition that the planning board did place, was that the building placed on the site shall be limited to a neutral color. So now these are all conditions that are proposed right now. The board, after the hearing tonight, if you hear other concerns or issues that can reasonably be addressed by placing a condition, you're more than welcome to add conditions to that. Or if you find one of the conditions 1 through 10 that you find that are not reasonable and that would not address an issue or concern that would be associated with use, you're allowed to remove those as well. So As I had mentioned, the planning board did vote for this unanimously at their April 23rd meeting. And as I stated earlier, that this is a two-step process. First, the vote on the rezoning, and then a vote on the conditions. So, and just some background, this is the site that was the originally for the Dollar General site. I think some of you guys were on the board at the time. So, when we talked to staff, when we talked to the applicant, we really were concerned with the type of uses that could go there. And we worked with the applicant to go through this type process, just because of the impact that and the citizens that did come out in concern of that type of use. And we thought this would be the more appropriate process to go through for the board. So I'll be more than glad to answer any questions that the board may have at this time.
Just looking at the application in terms of the use for warehousing for a company that sells and installs residential elevators, stair lifts, platform lifts, and dumb waiters. Now, not knowing the company, or if they're not local at this time, is they're not going to have equipment outside.
I think that was one of the conditions. They weren't allowed to have outdoor storage.
Okay, perfect.
Let me make sure that was. Yeah, no outdoor storage of any kind. Number 7, unless it's screened by the opaque fence. So you should not be able to see it.
So it's, I don't see a restriction on building height. That would come back to us? When would that come back to us? Once they presented a site plan, obviously.
Unless the board wanted to see that site-specific site plan or those building plans. I think what the applicant is proposing is a pre-engineered metal building. As long as you meet state building code for that height, the Davie County zoning ordinance does not limit or restrict a height limit. So if the board wants to place a max limit of, I don't know what height you would choose. Is it 30 feet? Is it 40 feet? Is that to the gable end? Is that so? You just need to, if you're going to place that kind of condition on there, you need to state the reasons why and to what impact that you're trying to address with that.
Do you know where Mr. Bell is housing this type business at this time?
Just based on what his application is, that'd be a question you would need to ask him.
Because when I investigated the addresses that were given, one address is his house, but the other 2 businesses' addresses are just a mailbox at UPS stores. So I'm just curious to where he's maintaining this business at this time.
Are they here?
Yes.
Oh.
That'd be good.
Any other questions for me?
What size trucks deliver your equipment? That's a really kind of tricky place to pull into the roadway, right in that area. Even the people that live there on Feed Mill Road, sometimes it's a little tricky. There's some blind spots there, so I'm a little bit concerned as to, are they large trucks or smaller trucks that deliver your equipment? Be fine.
And if we're getting ready to open up the public hearing at this point in time, the chairman has announced the date and hour of the public hearing on the proposed text amendment, Chapter 155-151, Davie County Code of Ordinance regarding the rezoning of Davie County's tax map G8 120A5, a 1.58 acre tract from residential 20 to highway business special use as seen in the application by Don Bell. There's been due notice given pursuant to requirements of Article 20B and Chapter 153A of the North Carolina General Statutes and pursuant to Section 155 251 of the Davie County Code and Ordinance. There's been due publication of notice of the public hearing in a newspaper within general circulation within Davie County as required, and the clerk to the board has attached an affidavit showing publication of said paper and a date at least 10 days prior to today's date. At this point in time, we'd ask all who wish to comment at this public hearing come forward to the podium, state your full name at the podium, and then comment on the proposal.
My name is Frances Dudley, and I live at 240 Crosswind Drive. This is off Peoples Creek Road in Advance, and so my home is a short distance from the property for which the rezoning request has been made. I am an architectural historian. I'm a member of Preservation North Carolina, although I want to be clear that I'm not representing Preservation North Carolina in this matter. And as an aside, Preservation North Carolina has one of the oldest endangered properties programs in the nation. It's quite well known. I'm addressing you to voice my concern over the possible fate of the Henry Tobias Smith Deal House, which occupies the tract at 2046 Highway 801 South, for which the rezoning has been requested. The Smith Deal House is one of the most architecturally significant and richly embellished homes in what is now the de facto historic district of Advance. It was built in 1881, and it's a remarkable example of Italianate styling with features that are also unique to many of the Advance homes in that historic district. There are several options available to achieve a goal of preserving and maintaining this important structure. To my way of thinking, the most optimal is to embrace the concept of adaptive reuse. That is, utilizing the building in a way that is different from its original purpose as a residence. Adaptive reuse is often possible via federal and state tax credits, and it encourages business investment in deteriorating dwellings that would otherwise be lost. Another, although less desirable option, is to allow the Smith Deal House to be moved to another location. I have personal experience with this since I moved an 1840 Moravian structure from Forsyth County to my land in Advance. So in closing, let me just say that rezoning and preservation should not be mutually exclusive processes. Rezoning in a collaborative and flexible way with restoration goals can ensure that a very important historic architectural legacy can be preserved for future generations of Davie County residents. Thank you for your attention.
I'm Don Bell. I'm the person looking to acquire the property. And I respect your efforts in wanting to preserve that property. I would like to be able to do that. However, I've had it investigated, and the structural integrity is just not sound. I've had it looked at by a couple of people because that was what I wanted to do as well. But they tell me it's not salvageable. So as much as I would like to do that, it's just not feasible. Parts of the structure has already began to collapse. The back part of it has, and while the front of the structure looks decent, it looks solid, it's not. The back part of it is already collapsed, and other parts of it are collapsing as well. So my intent would be to put a a metal building where the old, I guess it used to be a store at one point, over to the left of it is. And it would be approximately 14 feet in height, something like that. Use it mainly for a warehouse to store equipment when I'm in between installations. And as far as trucks, the only trucks that would be in there would be something that would be large enough to carry the elevator and drop it off. We would have a truck and a trailer type thing to do our installations. That's the intent. That's what I would use the property for.
So, Mr. Bell, from a traffic perspective, you don't see, you don't anticipate multiple trucks being in and out of there daily?
No, sir. No,
Okay.
sir. It's we would have our vehicles right now, would it be two to three vehicles, company vehicles, and so, you know, we would have a small office up front where we can meet with potential clients, but, you know, it's not going to increase the traffic in the area.
So are you and planning to take both structures down that are on the property?
Yes, ma'am, that's the intent. And like I'd said earlier, my intent was to try to preserve it if I could, but I've had it inspected and they tell me it's just not feasible. Any other questions?
Anybody have any further questions for the petitioner?
I'm just kind of curious why you chose that particular property of all the property in the county. I just thought that was a little odd.
Well, I just was looking for a property that I thought would be in a good location and something that, you know, had a good potential for being zoned commercial and easy access, and that's one of the properties that was available. I mean, that's no really secret sauce. That's it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Anyone else wish to comment? Mr. Chairman, seeing no one else come podium at this point in time to comment, I would now close the public comment session of this public hearing, provide you the opportunity to close the public hearing and discuss among yourself what action, if any, you wish to take.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple of questions to Andrew. I'm sorry, Andrew, I didn't. Did Ms. Dudley speak to the zoning folks?
I do not recall that name.
So the lady who spoke here did not speak, so that information was not there. And just this is a broad question, and you may not be able to answer it, or maybe no one here can. Has there been any effort by anybody up until the point that Mr. Bell brought this forward to, based in your knowledge, to do anything to renovate that home, do anything to upgrade that home, do anything to bring forward?
I'm not aware.
So not until this,
I mean,
okay.
yeah, nothing coming to our office or anyone that inquired to our office to do any type of renovation or anyone to call to inquire about it.
Okay, thank you.
And members of the commissioners, I spoke with Andrew earlier today, and I asked him some of those same questions, but more importantly, I asked him, had it been placed on the Historical Society's list or anything, and he said no, nothing had ever been done.
Somewhat the same.
The public hearing's still open, so yes, ma'am.
I just want to address efforts to have this placed on the National Register and also efforts to try to get this placed through the auspices of Preservation North Carolina. And unfortunately, the ownership has moved from, I believe this was an inherited property, if I'm not mistaken. Trying to locate the owner has been difficult. I indeed tried to act as a liaison between Preservation North Carolina and the owner, but was unable to locate the owner. So for that reason, there was sort of a dead end in terms of connecting Preservation North Carolina with this property, trying to have it marketed through them to someone who might be interested in rehabilitating it and doing the necessary work. Just wanted that as a point of information.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one question I'd like to ask of the applicant. If someone were to contact you tomorrow or up until you started construction of your site there that wanted to move that house, would you be agreeable to work with them? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Just off a little bit off of that, Richard, then what's your ETA on that, Bill, in terms of what kind of time frame are you talking about to begin the process of your?
Well, it's probably going to be at least a couple of months out before we start.
Anyone else wish to come forward? If not, Mr. Chairman, I turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, we will declare the public hearing closed and open the discussion up to the board to take action.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to rezone. I have a second.
Second.
Second. Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, that passes 4-1.
You would now need to take up the conditions issue.
All right. So at this time, there are 10 conditions on the property. Entertain a motion to approve those as presented.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Jones makes a motion to have a second. I'll second it. All right. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor of the zoning restrictions as presented, raise your hand. Okay. So that passes 5-0. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Meadwell. Right. Next, we have the 2019-2020 budget presentation, and turn it over to Mr. Eller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let me interject here at this point in time, as you get
Mr.
ready to
Vogel.
do your presentation, you're going to need to either vote before or after the presentation itself on the fire tax that has been recommended to you by the commission before you actually vote on the budget. So I just want to make that clear.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I can do that before or after. Entirely up to you.
I would say let's do that before, just to avoid confusion.
Mr. Chair, you've got a recommendation by the commission to adopt a rate of $0.02438 per 100. I believe is what you've got.
That's correct.
Which is the 2.438 cents.
Need to entertain a motion to integrate into the budget as proposed the 2.438 advance fire protection tax district rate.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to set the advanced fire protection tax district rate at .02438 per 100 valuation.
Have a motion.
Second.
Second.
Again, Mr. Chairman, clarification, this is basically a 2.5 cent tax increase on the citizens within the rural district.
Within that rural district that you established. That's correct.
That is correct.
And to clarify, the citizens voted for that.
Okay. So we have that motion to integrate the recommended rate of 2.438 into the general budget, just for the people in that district. So I have a motion and a second. So we'll vote on that at this time. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay. So that passes 3-2. All right. So now I'll turn it over to Mr. Eller for the general budget presentation.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go through this, and then I'll have Ms. West help me with a few pieces here throughout the presentation. Then we'll defer to Mr. Vogler for the public hearing as we move forward here. So if you'll bear with me as I give you the introduction here, and also as we go through the proposed budget to make sure that we meet all of the requirements set forth in general statutes as far as the recommended budget here. But as all of you know, the vision statement that we have affirms that we're going to be a vibrant, prosperous, and dynamic county, committed to building a sustainable future for generations to come while celebrating our rural heritage and enhancing our quality of life. Our mission statement also notes our desire to provide superior public service, offering all citizens the opportunity to improve their quality of life while enjoying the benefits of a safe, healthy, and vibrant county. We're pleased to work with the Board of Commissioners to further the county's strategic plan and to serve our staff, citizens, and community. As you know, we have our 5 focus areas: safe and healthy community, growth and infrastructure, business operations, quality of life and place, and education to guide our organization in making decisions as we focus on outcomes. Last year, you directed our staff to move to a performance-based budget, which is basically a block grant methodology, and instead of micromanaging hundreds of pages of line item budgets, even though we have those, each department will present annually to you a list of needs that always exceeded our ability to fund. So last year in your foresight, you wish to create a system that guides the 5 focus areas outlined in our strategic plan. And since this time, departments seem to have thrived in this new process. Therefore, we have the same structure that we use this year, and allows us to focus on historical actual spending, prioritizing outcomes, and using data to make informed decisions. This will require us to ask questions that we may not have asked before in order to compile data, so we show the results of the exemplary work being done by our staff each and every day. And as more companies choose to invest in Davie County, we hope that that investment will result in jobs that pay above the median income. And while economic growth is positive for communities, it comes with an associated cost that must be planned for in order to maintain fiscal sustainability. Population growth brings about increased service demands for our county services, as all of you know. And while economic development is strong, and we hope to enhance those efforts over the next few years as we plan for this future growth in infrastructure, we need to approach these items strategically with anticipation as we develop a comprehensive long-range plan, which will be completed in this budget to guide this growth properly. As the county grows, it's going to be important for us to maintain or even increase our service delivery to our citizens while sustaining a healthy fund balance. And therefore, our staff will continue to explore innovative ways to create revenue opportunities while looking toward outside funding opportunities from our state and federal partners. We'll also continue to work with our federal, state, and local elected officials on collective outcomes and needed resources to best serve our citizens. So as required by North Carolina General Statute 159-11, I present to you my recommended fiscal year 2019-20 budget for Davie County in the amount of $77 million, $39,815. This budget is balanced and prepared in accordance with the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act. We've included this for public inspection by having a hard copy of the clerk to the board's office and online, and these documents are included in the public hearing notice, my budget message, the presentation you're about to see, and the general fund and public utility fund summaries, proposed departmental fee schedules, the budget ordinance, and our superintendent's budget message. The recommended budget is my attempt to capture the collector board's vision of what to strive for in the upcoming year and beyond. It's based on the values communicated to me in individual discussions as a result of my updates to you and in work sessions that have been helpful. We know that sometimes it's hard to reach consensus on every single item. However, I hope you feel like there's more that you agree on than what we don't, as we tried our best to identify the things that were important to you. And while there are always things that we cannot anticipate year to year, like unfunded mandates and state and federal policies, our departments are well prepared to meet those challenges. Our first attempt at your priorities is my statutorily required recommended balanced budget at this point, and our goal is to help the consensus moving forward. So therefore, my understanding of common goals shared include the following: investing in our workforce by keeping staff salaries and benefits competitive. I'll talk about that more in the slides that will be forthcoming. Furthering the 5 focus areas as noted on our county strategic plan and ensuring that our budget aligns with those goals and focuses on our outcomes. Focusing on needing capital improvements to minimize incurring additional debt in the future until current debt is paid off. Investing in needed technology. Continuing to work with our fire and rescue departments regarding contracts and an ordinance. Ensuring that our fiscal policies guide our work and govern as well. And assessing our fee schedules to ensure they're competitive and fair within the region. We need to ensure that our new interlocal agreements are updated going forward into the new fiscal year, and those have been completed, and also further economic development, but also workforce development efforts within the county. We should plan for contractual increases and unfunded mandates, ensure that state and federal mandates are met, and last but not least, avoiding tax increases by maintaining the property tax rate and countywide fire tax rate. To do this, we'll plug our fund balance in order to achieve priorities and balance the budget. As a result, tonight you'll hear that we've been able to maintain a property tax rate of 0.738 per 100 evaluation, and therefore a penny of property tax at this rate equates to $462,000. We've also maintained the 0.04 countywide fire tax. It should be noted that in addition to this, the county contributes an additional 0.0204 to fire and rescue services from the general fund. As you just heard, the Advanced Rural Fire Protection tax district rate is now recommended at 0.02438 in addition to the current 4-cent countywide rate. So we will start showing you some slides here as we move forward of what that looks like. As we've discussed in our time together, Davie County hasn't experienced a surge in revenue over the past several years as our property tax revenues remain relatively flat. Ms. West is going to show you in the subsequent slides some data by our 5 strategic plan focus areas, but I wanted to go through these items, as I've already mentioned, just to note those on the screen so the public can view them as well. And again, all this is available for public inspection and has been online. So with that, I'm going to turn the next few slides over to Ms. West to go through, and then I'll wrap up the remaining section, and then we'll take any questions that anyone has. So Ms. West.
So we'll start off, we'll focus mostly on the general fund. There is some information in here about the Public Utilities Fund. So this shows us the general fund revenue in the proposed budget totals $66,169,062. 56% of that is property tax. And you can see some of the other pieces of the pie, if you will. Sales tax is 13.5, some intergovernmental revenues. We have charges for services for EMS and some health services, miscellaneous revenue, and fund balance appropriated, which I think is around $5 million in this proposed budget. So this is, get back. This is a table that shows the general fund expenditures in the recommended budget by focus area, as well as debt service. We've broken out debt service as well. So as you can see, the budget that we're proposing is $66 million for the general fund as compared to $61 million in the current year's original budget. Some of those variances include a proposed cost of living increase throughout the budget, and in the education focus area, proposing to loan money to renovate the K building, some interlocal increases, In business operations, a class and compensation market adjustment in human resources, that's included in the human resources budget. The health benefit increase that the county absorbed instead of the employees' portion of premiums, and also some contract increases. And debt service is changed in the recommended budget by about $384,000, and that's just the structure of the debt payments, what's coming due in the next year. And also in quality of life in place, we have some recreation and park changes. And then in growth and infrastructure, some county building and facilities maintenance increases. And then in safe and healthy community are some unfunded mandates in social services and the sheriff's office. And the next slide will show you how that breaks down as far as total expenditures of the $66,169,062. About 40% is safe and healthy communities. That includes the sheriff's office, detention, animal control, health, DSS, all of health and human services. Education is about 25%. As you can see, debt service, total debt service is a little more than 12% of the total expenditures, and 9% of the budget relates to debt service related to the schools. We further break it down by focus area, and the first one we have here is education. As you can see, the grand majority of that goes to the Davie County schools that we fund through the interlocal agreement that we have with them for current expense. That's about 93.61%, as well as DCCC and some other education-related functions. Business operations includes county administration. That's the board, the county manager, the county attorney. Human resources is about 14%, finance is 11%, and technology solutions about 25%. We also have here our contribution to CIP, the capital improvement plan that you approved last month. That contribution, the capital pay-as-you-go amount is included in that section. And here's growth and infrastructure. That's about $6 million of the expenditures for the general fund. A little more than half of that is development and facility services. And then we have economic development incentives is about a quarter of that. Here is the focus area for quality of life in place. You can see it's kind of somewhat evenly divided between the senior center, the public library, and recreation and parks, with some of our smaller departments filling out the other 0.25%. This is the safe and healthy community. This is the sheriff's office. So sheriff includes the sheriff's office, detention, and animal control. Health and human services is health and DSS. Communications and emergency services to make up $26 million. So that's a really good bit of the general fund right here. This is the public utilities fund. All of that fund falls in the growth and infrastructure focus area. That total budget is $6,047,264. This is how the expenditures break down for that. So the water treatment plant is 35%, and then you can see the Eastern Davie sewer and the county sewer is about 33%. Admin is 8%, and water operations is about 23%. This is just a summary of the capital improvement plan for 1920 that you approved in your last meeting. This is just a refresher of some of the amounts that are going to be in the CIP, and this just includes the 2019-2020, even though in the last meeting, as you recall, we had a 5-year capital improvement plan with some projections for the next 5 years as well, and the funding sources. This is the same as what Brad Blackwelder presented earlier for the Public Utilities Capital Improvement Plan. And again, this just shows the next fiscal year of 2019-2020. The projects in that fiscal year should total a little over $2 million.
Thank you, Ms. West. So one thing that we're going to do in this budget that I'm most proud of, and thank you, board, for working with us, is we definitely have to make sure that our salaries remain competitive within the region. So we're going to be going through several things over this next budget to make sure we're able to achieve those things. And one is to ensure that we remain competitive. We're going to proceed with the same process we had last year with the employees being eligible to receive up to a 2% increase. One will be a cost of living on July 1. The other 1% will be at the completion of their performance evaluation. And then last but not least, we'll be going through a multi-year market rate assessment to hopefully get us to where we need to be in the market over the next 2 to 3 years, a staging plan to get us there. And we'll be talking more and more about that over the next few months. In addition to that, as you can see, we're really starting to experience some pressures that we have to deal with, one of which is our healthcare cost increases. This will be the 5th year with no health insurance increase for staff. We are able to absorb those at your discretion this year, and thank you for being willing to do that. So that is included in this budget. In addition to that, making sure that we reduce our healthcare claims, we're going to continue our health risk assessment for full-time employees and spouses on this plan, and also ensuring that we maximize our employee wellness center. We're expanding services at that center. We've gotten great feedback from staff. We appreciate our partners at Public Health and our contracted provider for helping with that, and we're seeing payoffs in that regard for cost avoidance. And in addition, we're going to be rolling out a wellness incentive this year for staff who achieve certain thresholds on that. Before we get to this, before I go forward with this, I just want to make sure you realize that, due to our history of trying to level the operations for the organization, you can see on this chart that we have not raised taxes for some time for staffing operations, which means, I think our staff has tried to do the best they can with what they have. On this chart, you'll see where voters approved those increases over the past few years. You'll also see the last time operational taxes were raised was in between 05-06 and 06-07, and you'll see what this chart represents, and I'll let Ms. West comment to that here in a second. But apart from the recent increases for the high school debt and then the new park that was voted on by our citizens' referendum, we really need to think about growing in ways that make sense. And so that's this comprehensive planning process we've talked about, and smart economic development and workforce development to proactively prepare for the future. So one thing I want to say here, and then again, Ms. West, I'll turn this slide over to you. It's important to note that the county's maintained a bond rating of AA2 by Moody's, and also recently received an upgrade to AA+ by Standard & Poor's. And these rankings are as high as only urban counties are ranked. So for our county of Davie to be in the company of those urban counties is definitely something I hope you, the board, is very proud of, and we commend our finance office staff and our department heads and Ms. West for their leadership there. But Moody and S&P recently rated their county strongly in these areas because of our budget performance, conservative budget philosophy, and ability to balance our service demands with available revenues. And also, we're getting ready to talk about some fiscal policies. They noted the fiscal policies the board had taken as it relates to guiding our budget process that you'll hear Ms. West talk about, but also our utility funds. So because of those ratings, we were able to achieve even higher ratings in one of those areas because we had prudent fiscal planning processes, and the board did a great job with foresight on that. So I think these ratings show Davie County is very competitive in the Piedmont Triad and even beyond. So we're going to go through, after this slide, some fiscal policies that, again, we want you to consider as part of the budget ordinance. So, Ms. West, do you have anything to add to this slide?
No, this slide is a whole lot to look at, but if you'll just note here on the bars, the ones that are in red, those are the revaluation years, so you can see that sometimes the tax rate kind of went up and down, but that was just to remain revenue neutral. But as you can see, as Mr. Ellers pointed out, the last time that we increased taxes for operations was back in 06-07. That was a 5-cent increase. And that was also really for debt service, fire, and school current expense. And then when we built EMS 3 down on 601 South, so technically that's really not exactly for, county operations. The amounts noted here are that orange arrow is for the school debt for the new high school that was approved by the voters, and then the park increase that we did in the current year, 18-19 fiscal year, that was also voter approved.
You can go ahead and do this.
All right. Here is a depiction of fund balance. So Davie is the orange line that runs through here that kind of goes down. If you'll note here, the 25% line is in our fiscal policy. We want to maintain a minimum of 25%. We're getting really close to that. But this slide also compares us to our population group, which is the blue line that's on top. You can see that they're kind of rising and maintaining, and also statewide for all counties. The smaller the county or the smaller the local government entity, the better it is to have a higher fund balance. So that's why the statewide is a little bit lower than our peer group, which is counties from populations of 25,000 to 50,000. I'm projecting that we'll stay above the 25%. We have to make at least $400,000 of revenues over expenditures this fiscal year to do that, but I think we can do that.
Another thing to point out, you may recall when our fiscal analyst came to present, Mitch, I always pronounce his first name versus his last, Mitch from Davenport came to speak to you recently. He noted that a lot of counties are experiencing this, particularly those that are undergoing capital improvements. So you may hover down and you'll come back up. The other thing that should be noted, as I said it previously, is the company we find ourselves in. Urban counties typically have larger pennies that equate to a larger tax value, and the smaller counties you'll find in our cluster, those who are in our cluster, there's very few. So there's really not a lot to compare ourselves to in many ways, and I think that's what you heard in your last presentation, but we're very confident we'll stay above that threshold.
Right, and like I've told you before, big explosions aren't going to happen if we fall below 25%. It says in the fiscal policy that if we dip below 25%, we just have to have a plan how we're going to get it above 25% over 3 years.
Remind me, Ms. West, LGC requires?
The LGC recommends, it's not a requirement, but the LGC recommends a minimum fund balance of 8%. And how they come up with 8% is 1 month of, 1 month of coverage for expenditures. So 1 divided by 12 is 8%. So we have, a little more than 3 months if we weren't to get any revenues at all to get us through 3 months of expenditures.
Which I can say a lot of counties have thresholds well below ours. So again, it shows your fiscal conservativeness to set that at that rate. So we're going to go through some of the fiscal policies. I was going to read these verbatim, but because Ms. West has to go through the bond rating agencies with this, and also sometime our auditors, I'm gonna let you do this piece if that's okay.
Sure. Yes. So in our fiscal policies that we've passed and also amended late summer, I believe, that the county will use one-time or other special revenues for funding special projects, not continuing operations. I mean, that's just a good idea that you're not going to use your one-time revenues to fund something that's going to go on and on. You will develop a capital improvement plan. So the last one was reviewed, updated, and approved and adopted at your last meeting of May 6, 2019. We just talked about the 25%, maintain a targeted available fund balance at the close of each fiscal year equal to 25% of the general fund expenditures. That was that last slide. And then we will confine long-term borrowing to capital improvement of projects that can't be paid from current expense or revenues, except where approved justification is provided. And then to continue, we'll use a balanced approach to capital funding. So that's why you see in the presentation last month that it's important to have some pay-as-you-go or cash financing for these projects, and we try to do that as much as we can just so we can save on interest costs. We also are going to structure the debt so the minimum total payout ratio will be 55% over a 10-year period. That was also covered last month in Mitch's presentation, as well as the net debt service expenditures to the total general fund expenditures shall not exceed 15%. As you recall in last month's presentation, that Potentially, we might be exceeding that beginning in fiscal year 22-23 at the point that we borrow money to finance the detention center. So as we told you last month, there's lots of estimates and assumptions made, so that might change, but I just wanted to point out that that one is the one that we get the most pressure. And we've added a new thing last year. It was develop a 5-year financial forecast. We'll be able to do that more easily since we've been doing the performance-based budgets than we have been before, just so it makes it easier for us to project what's going to happen in the next 5 years. We also decided we needed to have some utility fund policies. So the county, for the utility funds, will maintain a minimum debt service coverage ratio of 1.5% and maintain minimum days of cash on hand of 365 days. Formalize a projection of revenues, expenditures, capital investments, and reserve requirements. And also, for the utility funds, develop a 5-year financial forecast. And again, that's going to be made easier in the change in budgeting that we've done recently. We'll also incorporate annual rate increases. I think that Mr. Blackwelder touched on this in his presentation, that anything over 3%, you know, that's going to be the maximum. And in our projection, we still only show a 2.25% every year for the next 5 years, so that's really a good thing. And then we have presented, and you approved earlier in the meeting, the capital improvement plan for the utilities fund. And last year in January in 2018, you adopted and implemented a system development fee strategy to fund the continued growth of the system.
All these are things that the bond rating agencies look at, and they're extremely important to us. So the fact that you put those in place last year and our request to continue those this year are really important. I want to pick up here on slide 22 to talk really about our solid waste fund. So we have an agreement with Public Service. That agreement was dated 5/02/16. It includes an annual consumer price index adjustment of 4.96% for fiscal year 20, which has also been accounted for in this budget. As a result of recycling increases of 100% due to the state and national commodity market, Republic Services requested a recycling rate increase of 1.04 per household, which equates to an increase of about $227,610 per year. To our knowledge, only 2 counties in the state provide free recycling services to residents, Orange County and Davie County. And because Republic Services just recently notified our Public Utilities Department of this in May, we do not know what impact this is going to have at this point, so it is not included in this recommended budget. To keep those annual projections accurate, our utilities has asked for an updated house count for the current agreement. And at some point, the board should reassess the sustainability of our recycling services. But our utilities department is currently negotiating with Republic Services regarding this for a phased-in approach to this increase, and we are asking Republic Service, when Mr. Lambert comes back before you in July, to come and present that case, because we do think that was a little late in the process to ask that request. So we'll be bringing them back before you. So at some point, we're going to have to make a decision about the sustainability of that service. And I know you've probably read some news articles and other places about recycling services in general and some challenges that exist there. So I'm going to go through some of the noteworthy items as we wrap this up tonight, as we look toward moving forward here. I mentioned our comprehensive plan, utilities master plan, and economic development plan. There's a lot of things there. The Ignite Davie Promise, Davie Works, the Cognition Museum, economic development, and then next gen leadership, making sure the next wave of succession planning is what it needs to be. There's a lot of strategies in place that align and complement our strategic plan there. In addition to this, we're also making sure that needed infrastructure and technology is prioritized. You've seen our capital improvement plans over the last few meetings. You've seen the advances we've made in technology over the past several years, and I think you've been pleased by that. I can tell you our staff are very well pleased by that. In addition to really holding off in the past on some capital improvements that now we're starting to roll out that you can see, obviously, that has an impact on the budget. but we are moving those things forward in your approved CIP in this budget. In addition to that, we have this staging plan as we've identified as part of that space needs study that we've recently spoken with you about. We've reinvented our incentive methodology, and I think we're pleased with where that's going to go as we grow from an economic development standpoint. We've also continued to invest in our senior center, who does a great job in their programs, and our veteran services, who also does a phenomenal job. Funding for our cultural and arts and tourism partners, replacing our decommissioned vehicles so before they reach the end of life, so we're not like many counties running vehicles till they can't run anymore. We're trying to be proactive about that. Maintain our fire department and rescue funding, supporting YVETI and the Moxville Circular, and then revising fee schedules to be competitive with our department heads. Continue our investment in education. This will be the 5th consecutive year for Davie County Schools through the interlocal, with an increase there. The interlocal agreements with the towns have been finalized and included. Our typical mileage reimbursement rate, and making sure that our focus areas move forward, particularly for our fairly qualified health center that we've been talking about for some time. We're also going to move forward with those 5 focus areas that I mentioned early on in your strategic plan and performance-based budget, and mentioning that our investment in environmental concerns through the cooperative extension and our farmers, the Forestry Service, Davie Soil and Water, and the Watershed Improvement Commission, and then any operational increases for the new park that's going to roll out in spring 2020 that we've spoken about. Partnering with Twin City, which is now, I think, Fusion, but Twin City Sports for the new park is still in play in here. I think we have a conference call about that coming up this week. In addition to looking at the contract for the detention as far as healthcare was renewed. And we also want to make sure that our Health and Human Services folks have what they need to get the work done at social services. In addition to that, making sure that agency funding for rec centers and the Recreation and Parks Advisory Board, who's done a fabulous job of working with Mr. Moore on doing what needs to be done and partnering with those centers. I know some of you are involved in that effort as well. The General Assembly always throws us some changes, and we have to respond to those pieces, one of which is in our elections department as well, and we appreciate Tabitha's leadership there. Then we have 2 loans for capital that are there if they're so taken. One is for the Davie Little League for lighting upgrades due to safety concerns, and one for Davie County Schools to possibly see what can happen to the K building. Those would be repaid with interest over a 5 to 10 year period. If so chose to be taken, and then support for the maintenance of the Lake Louise Park that is currently in the planning phases, so if that comes to fruition. In addition to that, capital outlay for the community college for an expanded parking lot. And with that, the last thing I want to say in closing is I put our online, you will find the public hearing notice, the budget message, the recommended budget presentation, the general fund summary, public utilities summary, the fee schedule, the budget ordinance, the superintendent's message, as I mentioned, but also our strategic planning goals. And I'm going to close with that. As with every year-end budget, there's a reconciliation process that takes place. So as part of our performance-based budget initiative, what we'll be doing between now and October is reconciling year-end numbers. We'll be reporting out to the board in October. I hope you'll be proud of that presentation to see how that process is working after a year-end reconciliation. We'll report on the outcomes and also where we think we are at fiscal year-end. Compiling this budget is a tremendous effort. I have to note my thanks to our finance and budget staff, all of our department directors, and I appreciate those who are here, our sheriff and our registered deeds. All of those folks have provided a tremendous amount of leadership. Their work's outstanding. They've been great teammates to me, and I commend them for their dedication to this organization. Their performance is always exemplary, and because of this, there's no need to micromanage them because of their proven experience and their expertise. I also want to introduce during this time our two interns, Angela Grimaldo. Angela, raise your hand. Who's a Golden Leaf Scholar from UNC Chapel Hill, and Jordan Page. Jordan, raise your hand. Who's an MPA student from UNCG. They also participate in this budget as a learning process for them. The thing I wanted to leave you with, Commissioners, tonight is Davie County is filled with lots of great people who just bless me immensely. They volunteer daily to make this community a better place. I'd like to thank each commissioner for your input and in your confidence of me as your county manager, and each county employee who faithfully serves the citizens of Davie County each and every day. You know, the demands of public service are great, but they can be very rewarding too. And we'd like to thank you and all of our citizens for their time. And thank you for all that you do to collectively move this county forward. And now, before you tonight, the proposed budget is presented for your consideration. And I know there are more actions that need to be taken, Mr. Vogler, one of which is to maintain the tax rate, and one is to approve the budget post the public hearing. So I'll defer back to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eller. I guess at this time, before we take any action, does anybody have any questions of Mr. Eller or comments?
I would just say this, I appreciate, the reason there won't be a lot of questions is you guys were very transparent, informative to us in the meetings we had leading up to this, and so, thank you.
I would just say that this was the first year of the performance-based budgets, and I appreciate all the department heads embracing that and working with staff. And also, our staff continues to be extremely innovative. We're coming up with recommendations that saves us money and allows us to accelerate some projects, especially on the capital side, and that's been extremely good. You know, we've not had a tax increase for operations in 12 years, and to me that speaks to the efficiency and of our organization. So not going to sit up here and say we don't have any fat, but I'm going to say I'd like for someone to show it to me. And the last thing I would say is with the bond ratings that we continue to slightly improve, that speaks to the financial and fiscal responsibility that we have. So with all that said, thanks to the staff, and really appreciate it. Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say also, not only thanks to staff because they worked so hard on this budget, but thanks to all our employees who work so hard to help staff do what they need to do.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
So with that, Mr. Chairman, we'll go to the public hearing on the proposed budget. The chairman has announced just the date and hour of the public hearing on the proposed budget ordinance as seen on page 209, I believe, of your agenda packet. There's been due notice given pursuant to the requirements of Chapter 20B and Chapter 153A and Chapter 159 in North Carolina General Statutes as seen on page 147 of your agenda packet. This new publication notice was run in a newspaper of general circulation in Davie County as required, and the clerk of the board has attached that affidavit showing the publication of said paper on a date at least 10 days prior to today's date. And I would ask that all who wish to comment at this public hearing come forward to the podium, state your full name for the board, and then comment on the proposed budget ordinance. Mr. Chairman, seeing no one come forward, I would now turn the public hearing back over to you as board chair to close the public comment section of this public hearing. Provide the board then the opportunity to discuss among yourselves what, if any, action you wish to take with regards to the proposed budget ordinance.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Vogler. All right, at this time we'll declare the public hearing closed. And one more time, anybody got any comments or questions? Okay, well, seeing none, we have two actions that remain to be taken. The first one is entertain a motion to adopt the 73 .738 per $100 valuations for fiscal year 2019-20, as in fiscal year 2018-19, and keep the current fire tax rate of 4% per 100 valuation for the county. I'd like to make that motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. Okay, that passes 5-0. Okay, the last item we have to consider is entertain a motion to adopt the budget ordinance as set forth in the manager's presentation and attached recommended budget for fiscal year 2019 and 20.
I'll make a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Get a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. Thank you, and that,
You need to do that again.
okay, all right. All in favor of the budget ordinance as set forth in the manager's presentation, raise your hand. 4. All opposed? 1. Okay. That passes 4-1. All right, thank you. All right, next we move to the consent agenda. Does anyone have any questions about that or?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, Sheriff, do you mind, you mind coming up? One thing, Mr. Chairman, if I might, we have one item on this consent agenda regarding a retirement of a detention officer, and I felt it'd be only fitting for Sheriff Hartman to state something about what you'll be approving as part of consent tonight.
Well, I think it's on the agenda as typical when one of my folks retires that are issued a sidearm. We retire that sidearm and his badge, and you decommission the sidearm, and I usually pay for their pistol permit, and then we give him that as a retirement presentation. So that's what this is. Jerry Snyder's retiring from the detention center after 20 years of service. He's been an exemplary employee, and I'm going to miss him. I think I've had discussions with some of y'all over the next 4 or 5 years. I have a huge number of people that are going to reach retirement age, and it's going to be a task to lose that amount of training and experience and replace it. So I have a feeling I'll be coming to see you to do this quite a bit over the next couple of years, but I would appreciate your assistance with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations to Officer Snyder. Sounds like it's well-deserved retirement. So. All right. So, any other questions or input on the consent agenda? All right. Seeing
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. That is approved 5-0. Thank you. All right, next we will go to the county manager's report. Mr. Eller.
Mr. Chairman, I'll forego my report tonight, given I've kept you for some time, but I do want to thank, again, our staff and our community partners who are here and all those involved in this process over the past few months. I'm very humbled and pleased to be part of this team and be before you tonight, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any old business that come before us this evening? Seeing none, any new business? All right, seeing none, we'll move. We do have closed session on the agenda. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11, 4, to discuss matters relating to the location, expansion of industries or other business in the area served by the public body, including agreement on a tentative list of economic development incentives that may be offered by the public body in negotiations. Someone, okay, have a motion, have a second.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor of going into closed session, raise your hand. We are in closed session. We will be back shortly, I hope. Thank you.
Session.
All right, we're back in open session. Appreciate everyone sticking around, the few that did. All right. So for the record, we are back in closed session, but we are taking no action from the closed session. Thanks for your patience. So at this time, we'll go to commissioners' comments. Mr. Jones.
Mr. Chairman, I would, good friend, Ms. Finney.
Just want to tell everybody thank you for all the work that you do for the county and for sticking with us tonight. Hope everybody has a good week.
Mr. Blakely.
I just want to thank John and all you guys and girls for all you're doing on this budget. You know, I can tell how much work goes into it. You know, you guys, you know, taking us under your wing and kind of, you know, doing those extra things like Mark said. So I really appreciate that. It means a lot. It really does. So thank you.
Richard.
Thank you, guys. We'd like to always see the room packed. Hope you come back next time. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it all sincerely. It's been a lot of time together, especially on EMS the last year. So anyway, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved. Second.
All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Good night.